I have always found that people worry about money in the dark, not only literally at midnight, though they certainly do that. I mean, they worry in the dark because they do not know what normal really looks like. They look at a neighbor's new car. They look at someone else's vacation photos. They look at a coworker who seems calmer than they feel. And they start asking the most dangerous financial question in the world. Am I behind? The trouble is, most people do not know what they are comparing themselves to. They compare themselves to performance, to display, to curated fragments, to people who may be broke in luxury, to people who may be doing better than they look or worse. That is why I like numbers. Not because numbers are warm, because they are honest when used correctly. And when it comes to money, a lot of relief and a lot of urgency come from the same place, seeing the real numbers, not the cinematic version, not the social media version, the real version. So let me show you the average person, not because average is the goal. Average is often the warning. I want you to see what ordinary financial life in America actually looks like, because once you see it clearly, one of two things usually happens. Either you realize you are already doing better than you thought, or you realize the bar to become above average is much lower and much more attainable than you imagined. Either way, clarity helps. Let us start with income, because that is where almost everybody begins the story. The old picture of the typical full-time worker earning only a little over $1,000 a week is too stale. Now the current one is higher full. Time wage and salary workers are now sitting at a median weekly income that annualizes to something around the mid-$60,000 range before taxes. Now, some people hear that and feel relieved. Others hear it and feel insulted. Both reactions miss the point. The point is not whether that figure sounds big or small in the abstract. The point is what kind of life it has to carry after taxes, because gross income is a storytelling number. Take-home pay is the life number. That is the difference. People forget. You can sound comfortable on paper and still feel squeezed every month because the gross number keeps flattering you, while the net number keeps disciplining you. That is why income alone does not tell you very much. What matters is what the income is meeting on the other side. Expenses, debt, savings, and perhaps most importantly, habits. Now let us talk about retirement, because this is where the average person's story becomes much more sobering. A lot of older personal finance content used to throw around retirement balances that were already too low even when they were first published. The problem is worse now, because even when balances rise a bit, the cost of retirement rises too. What I think matters more than one headline balance is the structure underneath it. A great many adults still do not have the kind of tax-advantaged retirement base they should have, and far too few feel confident that their retirement plan is on track. Think about that. The average problem is not that people are slightly behind. The average problem is that many people are not even close to where they hoped they would be, and they know it. That is a very different situation. It means the anxiety is not imaginary, it is informed. And it also tells you something hopeful if you are willing to hear it. If only a minority of people feel on track, then simply becoming the kind of person who funds retirement consistently already puts you on a different road from the crowd. That is one of the themes I want you to keep in your head through all of this. Average is beatable, not because you are special, because average behavior is often much weaker than people assume. Now let us talk about Social Security, because when retirement accounts are thin, people start hoping the government will close the gap. The average monthly retirement benefit is now a little above $2,000. That is real money. It also is not enough to comfortably carry most modern retirements by itself. People hear $2,000 and think maybe that could work. In some narrow situations, yes, no mortgage, very low expenses, careful living, good health. No serious surprises, but that is not how most retirements behave. Retirement is not only groceries and utilities, it is also medicine, repairs, transport, family help, inflation, and the simple fact that life does not become frictionless just because you stop working. That is why relying on Social Security alone is not a plan, it is a hope. And hope is not a retirement strategy. Now let us come to spending, because spending is where a lot of illusions die. American households are now spending far more than many people emotionally realize. Average annual expenditures are no longer living in the mid-$60,000 range. They are up in the high $70,000 range. That means the average household is spending something like the mid-$6,000s every month. That is a stunning number when you slow down and let it land. Because once you understand that the average household is spending more than $78,000 a year, you immediately understand why income so often feels insufficient, even when the headline salary sounds respectable. And it gets more interesting when you break it apart. Housing is still the biggest category. Transportation is still one of the most dangerous hidden killers. That means the two decisions that dominate ordinary financial life are still the same decisions. People are least emotionally disciplined about where you live, what you drive. That is why I often tell people that personal finance is less about hundreds of decisions and more about a handful of very large ones. Get those wrong, and you can feel disciplined every day while still never making progress. Get those mostly right, and you can outperform average without doing anything particularly glamorous. That is the beautiful simplicity of it. Now let us move to credit scores, because this is one of those areas where average behavior is better than people assume. The average FICO score in the United States is now in the low 700s. That is solidly good. Credit territory, I think this surprises people because they assume the typical person must be a complete disaster. Usually they are not. Usually they are just inconsistent. And that matters because a decent credit score tells me many people are at least doing some basic things correctly. They are paying enough bills on time. They are not destroying every line of credit they touch. They are functioning. But functioning is not the same thing as thriving. A decent credit score does not rescue a person from weak savings, expensive lifestyle choices, or chronic underinvesting. It simply keeps the borrowing costs from becoming even worse. That matters. It just does not solve the deeper problem. Now let us talk about the ugliest number in the entire story. Credit card debt. The old script used a number that was too dramatic as a universal average. The current broad picture is a little lower than that for the typical consumer, but still ugly enough to do real damage. Recent nationwide estimates put average credit card debt per American around the mid-$6,000s, and I want to be clear about why I care so much about this. I do not care because debt is immoral. I care because credit card debt is usually paired with interest rates high enough to annihilate almost any sensible investing plan. If you are paying 20% or more on revolving debt while dreaming about long-run market returns in the high single digits, you are not building wealth. You are financing consumption at a rate that crushes compounding before compounding gets a chance to help you. This is why I have always said that for an ordinary household, eliminating high-interest debt is one of the cleanest financial wins on the board. It is not exciting. That is exactly why it works. Now we come to net worth, which is where all the prior habits finally tell the truth. Income is a flow. Net worth is a scorecard. It tells you what is left after years of choices. The median family net worth in America is now just under $200,000. Now, when people hear that, they often have the wrong reaction. If they are below it, they feel ashamed. If they are above it, they feel secure. Both emotions are too easy because net worth is a strange creature. A person can have a solid net worth and no liquidity. Another can have low net worth but strong direction. Another can have home equity and little freedom. Another can have moderate net worth and very strong cash flow. So I do not use net worth as a moral label. I use it as a map. But even as a map, the median tells us something useful. It tells us the average person is not secretly sitting on a fortune. And it tells us that large visible consumption often says far less about wealth than people think. A lot of people have expensive-looking lives and very unimpressive balance sheets. That is one of the oldest American illusions. Now let us talk about saving rate. Because this is where the future is built or quietly abandoned. The average American is not saving 10 or 15% of disposable income, not even close. The personal saving rate is running around 4%, give or take. That is not a judgment. It is a warning. A society saving 4 or 5% of disposable income is not building much margin. It is surviving. Maybe coping, maybe pretending, but not building much room for shocks, opportunity, or strong retirement outcomes. And this is why I keep telling people the same thing. You do not need to become extraordinary all at once. You just need to stop behaving like the average person in the categories where the average person is weak. Save more than 4%. Avoid revolving credit card debt. Fund retirement consistently. Refuse to let transportation and housing consume everything. You do those things, and you are no longer playing the average game. Now, let us come to retirement age, because this is the place where fantasy and reality most clearly part ways. People often say they will retire around the mid-60s. In real life, many people stop working earlier than they expected. Not always because they became free, often because life intervened, health, layoffs, burnout, caregiving. That matters because many financial plans assume people will smoothly work until the exact age the spreadsheet prefers. Life does not care about the spreadsheet. That is why margin matters so much. That is why emergency savings matter. That is why retirement savings matter. That is why low debt matters, because reality has a habit of arriving before the official retirement date. And if your entire plan only works under ideal sequencing, then you do not have a plan. You have a wish. Now, I want to bring all of this together because the real value of average statistics is not trivia. It is diagnosis. The average worker earns enough to sound fine in conversation and still feel pressured after taxes. The average household spends much more than many people guess. The average credit score is decent, but the average savings rate is weak. A lot of people are not confident about retirement. Social Security gives a base, but not a full retirement life. The median family net worth is meaningful, but nowhere near the cartoon wealth people imagine when they look around and think everyone else must be doing better. That is the picture. And what does that picture tell me? It tells me average financial life in America is not a disaster for everyone, but it is far shakier than many people assume. It also tells me that beating average is not some mystical feat reserved for geniuses. Beat the average in a few critical areas, and the compounding starts getting unfair very quickly. Earn a bit more, save quite a bit more. Keep consumer debt lower. Invest regularly. Avoid lifestyle inflation. Do that long enough. And the gap between you and the average person stops being small. It becomes enormous. That is what people do not understand about personal finance. The winning is not usually cinematic, it is cumulative. And that should give you hope, because it means you do not need to become some impossible version of yourself. You need to become slightly more disciplined than average in the places where average is already weak. That is a much more realistic challenge. So if these numbers startled you, good, they were supposed to. If they comforted you, also good. That means you may already be farther ahead than your anxiety was admitting, but do not use the averages as an excuse to relax. Use them as a measuring device. If you are saving more than 4 or 5%, you are ahead of average. If you are investing consistently and not carrying ugly credit card debt, you are ahead of average. If you are serious about retirement before panic arrives, you are ahead of average. If you are making the large decisions, well, housing, transportation, debt, and savings, you are building something much sturdier than average. That is the real lesson. The average person is not a target to imitate. The average person is a baseline to surpass. And once you see the baseline clearly, a lot of the mystery disappears, not because the road gets easy, because the direction finally gets obvious. That is one of the most valuable things money statistics can do for you. They stop money from feeling like fog, and when the fog lifts, good decisions become much easier to make.